Well, here we are joining you, connecting with you as we serve you the news review this morning on the AM show. Thank you for making the time. Shortly, we'll be joined by Executive Director for the Media Foundation for West Africa, Suleimana Brima. In the meantime, we have a stack of newspapers here that we're going to be walking you through. But before we do that, let's have a good look at what to expect by way of the weather this morning. Joining us, senior forecaster at the Ghana Meteorological Agency, Joshua Asamoah, joins the conversation. Josh, a very good morning to you. Thank you for connecting.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Great. So over the weekend, a few showers here and there, and some people got concerned around the Ibri area. But here we are. It's the start of a fresh week. What can we expect by way of temperatures across the country today? And are we to expect any changes in weather, major changes?
Well, for major changes, we are not really expecting any today. It's actually raining this morning around the transition zone. That's areas around Wenchi, Sunyane, Tos, Banda. That's the Bono and Savannah regions, the border of the Bono and Savannah regions. It's raining there this morning. It actually started at dawn, and it's still producing some moderate rainfall there. But for the rest of the country, you will just see some cloudy conditions during the day. And so chance of rain is quite minimal. There's a possibility of some slight rain over a few areas in southern Ghana, but for most parts of the country, we should just expect the cloudiness. But that should clear as the day progresses. This morning, temperature is quite low, around 23 degrees Celsius for the area where it's raining this morning. But the rest of the country is between 24 and 26 degrees Celsius. I will be rising because we'll be getting sunny conditions coming in.
Joshua, I'm losing you a bit. I'm not hearing everything you're saying. Could you just recap the last bit you were delivering?
Okay, so I'm saying temperatures are quite low around the transition area where there's rainfall currently happening. But for the rest of the country, we are expecting around 24 to 26 degrees Celsius this morning. But this will rise as we progress into the afternoon, because we are expecting some sunny conditions to be experienced. And so maximum temperature for Greater Accra will rise to around 32 degrees Celsius. And for the middle portion, that's the Ashanti, Eastern, and parts of the Western regions, we're expecting around 33 to 34 degrees Celsius.
All right.
Northern Ghana will have around 35 to even in over areas in the northern sector, but for Greater Accra, today looks quite good.
And for those who may be asking what the transitional area is, can you just break it down for our viewers?
Okay, so transition zone is the area between the middle sector and the northern parts of the country. And so if you are moving from the Bono East towards the Savannah and the northern regions, those areas are the transition zone. So like I said earlier, Wenchi, Kentampo, Techiman area towards Banda areas, that's where I'm actually talking about.
All right. Thank you for giving us that scope on the weather. We're very grateful. We're hoping, of course, for pleasant skies or pleasant weather, just as you've painted. But thank you so much. Joshua Asamoah is a senior forecaster at the Ghana Meteorological Agency. Let's dig now into the newspapers. And as and when we're joined by Suleimana Brima, I see him now. I see Suleimana Brima. We'll get into the papers with him. Mr. Brima, a very good morning to you, sir. Another Monday is here.
Yes, good morning, Ben. Great to be connected again.
What do I say? Sandazua.
Sanukade.
Okay. Yesterday, I was at a program that had the chief imam there, you know, and it was so beautiful. He was with Father Campbell, the vice president, for a major program. And it was really interesting seeing him. So this morning, seeing you in your outfit just reminds me of seeing a very affable, very tolerant, wonderful person, really, the chief imam. I'm just in love with him and everything he does. At his age, he showed up for a function like that, you know. Anyway.
Well, absolutely. I think he's blessed, and we are blessed to have someone like him, who keeps us united and has become one of the most revered people in our society. And we just pray for long life and energy for him to continue the good work that he's doing. Otherwise, he's a great man.
Yep. Okay, on that note, let's get into the papers this morning. The Daily Graphic newspaper, partner to fight water pollution. The Vice President tells chiefs and MMDAs. Vice President Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia has called on traditional authorities to partner metropolitan, municipal and district assemblies to deal decisively with illegal mining, that is galamsey, but not all, mining along that level is galamsey, which has resulted in the pollution of water bodies. He has also given an assurance that the activities of the Operation Vanguard will be deepened to help combat the menace of illegal mining. He was speaking at a Durbar to climax this year's Home Festival of the Chiefs and the People of Achimebwakwa in Chebi last Saturday. And when you look at the stories, the rhetoric that has characterized our water bodies, especially now that the Ghana Water Company Limited is complaining about turbidity levels, about this, about that, and the level of chemicals or the amount of chemicals that have to be used to process our water, on the back of which there have even been recent calls that, look, we need to pay more when it comes to our utilities. What do you make of this fight? Now, chiefs, MMDAs are being called upon, but just go back a few years and everything we've done, if that couldn't solve it, is this going to solve it?
Well, I think that the fight against galamsey requires the efforts of everyone. Of course, government would have the primary role and responsibility of enforcing law and order. And of course, it has the mandate and capacity to be able to deploy our security services as and when they need to be deployed. But if you listen to people who are involved in mining, they will tell you that, well, once the community members are involved and the community leaders are aware of it, it becomes a difficult thing to fight because you cannot keep the police and the military in the various communities and towns across the country. And remember, in Ghana, almost every part of the country has some, natural resource endowment that makes mining viable. And so it's important that community leaders are educated to understand the implications of illegal mining. Yes, you get the money today. As a chief, you may be paid something today, but the long-term effects can be really devastating for your own people, yourself, and your community going forward. So I think it's a welcome call. Of course, government has to do its part in terms of not just the enforcement of the rules around mining, but also the whole thing about unemployment, because sometimes it's quite a complex situation when people are struggling to find food, when young people are struggling to make ends meet, and they feel, well, we can go into mining and make some money. And then at the same time, we are not allowed to do it. I think what's important is what the government is trying to introduce, the community mining scheme, where people will be allowed to mine, but in a regulatory way, so that the environmental destruction can be minimized. Then the final word I want to have on this is, I'm wondering why those excavators that were confiscated are still parked at this aviation land, and I think they are hundreds, even though some eventually flew away. Flew away in quotes. They are still in their hundreds, and I'm wondering, why do we allow those machines to remain there to rot when they could actually be, if for nothing at all, be donated to district assemblies to maintain our feeder roads, or even to give away to our neighboring countries as a gesture, rather than allow them to rot the way they are being allowed to rot. But I don't know what the plan is. But I think it's really a bad idea to keep the machines as they are now.
And speaking of flying away, just got me casting my mind back. I think some months back, I shared a story about bees. I think we had imported bees, can you imagine, into the country to produce honey. And we had spent a ton of money. This was in the 70s or so. And they flew away without producing a pint of honey. I could go back and look at the figures. Tens of thousands of pounds. We also have guinea fowls that have flown away. Now our excavators are flying away. It appears everything flies away in this country. But anyway, Government assesses impact of economic interventions. That story is on page 20. Let's just take a quick look at that. So the government will from today, so that was Wednesday, conduct a series of engagements with key sector players in the economy to assess the impact of the economic mitigation measures announced in March this year. The exercise is expected to enable the government to determine whether or not the measures have provided enough cushioning from the adverse effects of the recent global crises. Information Minister Kojo Nkrumah, who disclosed this in an interview with journalists in Accra, said the engagements would also enable ministers of state to examine what more should be done to support Ghanaians during these difficult times. And these are some interesting bits in here. I don't know what your take would be on that. You know, during the lockdown, of course, there was the supposedly free water and electricity and hot food, like we've been told. And then in recent times as well, a little bit of a cushion when it comes to fuel prices and all of that. A few pesos, taken off. Your quick reactions?
Well, sometimes it's really difficult to comment on these matters because for the free water, free electricity for a certain category of people in our country, yes, it was good. But as it turned out, I think that to a large extent, those measures were put in place just as a way of cushioning the electoral fortunes of the government rather than an act of goodwill. And that is because, I mean, given what we are going through now, the same people who were supported then are now being, squeezed to their wits. And you wonder if they were poor then, how have they recovered from the effects of the pandemic? To the point that now, if you look at how much is being paid for electricity, water perhaps has remained where it has been, maybe except the marginal increases. But if you look at fuel, and where things are now, and the fares that people have to pay, particularly those who are not using private vehicles, the fares that they have to pay to commute from one place to the other. You wonder whether there is any such mitigation measures. I mean, a true mitigation measure would be President Akufo-Addo cutting down his ministers from the current, 100 or so to maybe 50. This country can be run with just about 50 ministers. Why is he not doing that? To the extent where we still have, Adjo Asafo maintaining the ministerial position after almost a year of being away.
That particular issue has become very problematic, hasn't it? I mean, this is like a case in point. I've never seen this in the Fourth Republic. I mean, it's a novelty. And we've spoken about it time and again. But that also brings to mind another aspect of the entire conversation. It appears on some of these matters, again, maybe we should look at our constitution because the executive powers are that wide. And we can talk all the talk, but in the end, it's up to Mr. President to decide whether or not to axe her. I mean, I have my own thinking on that, but she's not going anywhere. She's still at post, very much so, because if you listen to her interview with Blessed Soga, my colleague, she said that she was expecting to come back and take up both her parliamentary slot and her ministerial position. You disagree?
Well, that's an indication of the quality of governance we are getting from President Akufo-Addo. I don't think that, anywhere in the world, this can happen. And I don't think that in Ghana, if President Akufo-Addo, for example, was in opposition and a different person was in power, right, and this was what is happening, I don't think that the president would say this is something that should be allowed.
So double standards in there, right?
I mean, absolutely. I don't think that the president can justify anywhere that, keeping this person as a minister for over a year, close to a year now, is an act of good governance or an act of good leadership. And the point I'm making is that if indeed this government wants to really introduce any mitigation measures, it's about cutting back on the appointees, cutting back on the number of ministers, cutting back on the number of presidential staffers, which are really eating a lot into our resources. And unless those things are done, I mean, President Ouattara, just neighboring Cote d'Ivoire, at some point decided to cut back his appointees to 30 as a way of, dealing with the impact of the pandemic and the effects of other global issues, such as Ukraine, Russia, and all of that. But we are still maintaining the same number going forward.
Right.
The issue of
and curiously, we don't even reshuffle. That's another issue that people have. We don't necessarily reshuffle because there have been a few changes, but not much of a reshuffling. We saw, for example, Napo, Dr. Matthew Opoku-Prempeh, moved from the Education Ministry to the Energy Ministry, and then his deputy taking over. A few changes here and there. We saw Kojo Oppong-Nkrumah, take over from Dr. Hamid and all of that. But apart from that, no major changes. And people have spoken, fiercely about that as well. That, look, it appears we have a stagnated system. People are comfortable and they can just be in these slots and it's all smooth running. But that's just one of the stories to look at. This one might interest you as well. Criminal Code embraces plea bargaining, and Parliament has passed the Criminal and Other Offences Procedure Amendment Bill 2021 to provide for plea bargaining in the administration of criminal justice. Now, when assented to, Suleimana, the law will ensure the speedy trial of cases and help decongest the prisons. The memorandum accompanying the bill named the benefits of plea bargaining, hence the amendment to include a reduction in caseload of the courts and prosecutors, saving the state time and money by avoiding long and protracted trials. I'm sure this is something that will find favor with you, something positive.
Well, it's absolutely positive. Anything that is intended to further enhance the rights of all persons is a great development. For me, if you listen and read about what happens in our prisons, it's quite sometimes very, very appalling, and you get really sad if you hear about a number of people who have been on remand for sometimes years. It's really something that is sad, and it doesn't really reflect positively on us as a country in terms of adhering to the fundamental principles of human rights and all of that. So anything that is done to further advance our compliance with local, regional, and international human rights obligations that we have is really positive. My only concern is that age-old concern that people have expressed in terms of how many plantain thieves or people who have stolen plantain and cassava or fowls are in prisons versus the people who have stolen what can buy sometimes thousands of fowls and thousands of goats and sheep, and yet are walking on the streets because they are covered by political godfathers and so on and so forth. That, for me, it's the true administrative and criminal justice thing that we have to crack. Otherwise, continuing to tail plantain thieves and, that carpenter who stole a master's toolbox and all of that.
Right.
Yes, it's good to instill proper values, but the real people who are causing the damage to this country must also find themselves in jail.
Let's look at some other stories very quickly. Graphic Group increases cover prices. Why am I bringing you that? Because it appears prices on everything, skyrocketing. I've been, it's interesting. Over the last week when I went and bought a few things, people would complain because they would tell you that the price was this just a few days ago, but guess what? It's changed, and so you have to pay more. But the Graphic Group is also increasing its cover prices for, the Daily Graphic, the Mirror, Graphic Showbiz, Graphic Sports, and all of that. Even, I find this interesting. The Catholic Standard, and I'm Catholic, so I know, is about to, increase prices. This has not happened in a long while. So when these things start happening, Charlie, Chrome Ayeshi. Anyway, so there's also monsters on roads, rickety vehicles, predatory roads hunt, prey. That's in the middle spread of the paper. And Barnier strikes as Hearts stunned Bechem to retain MTN FA Cup. Any final thoughts on what I shared before I move to the Ghanaian Times newspaper, Suleimana? Or should I just move ahead?
Well, I think we can move on.
All right. Government assesses economic intervention. So what I may have failed to add from the Daily Graphic story was that they were also looking at the different dynamics when it comes to, let me just make reference to that. It just skipped my mind. So they were also looking at the reopening of the land borders and the removal of COVID-19 restrictions. Yes, now I remember. So those two as well, in terms of the measures to alleviate the suffering of ordinary Ghanaians. So that story in the Ghanaian Times as well on page 7. Then rekindle volunteerism to deal with filth. That's the vice president, according to the chiefs. And you know, in recent times, we launched a volunteerism project in the country, which hopefully will make some great inroads for us. Parliament amends Criminal or Other Offences Act, like I mentioned, and MTF honors Dr. Awal for innovative tourism drive. But let me just get to that story on page 15 very briefly. Not the substance of the story, but Dr. Awal as tourism minister. And I mean, you recall he was the minister for business development, I think. And he's now minister for tourism. When you look at our tourism in the country, I've always had major problems. Where do you think we're falling short, Suleimana? And what can we do? Because, mind you, we've been told that the National Cathedral, for example, will serve as a touristic site.
Well, that's if we manage to really put it up, because I doubt that.
Do you have doubts about it?
Absolutely, I doubt the National Cathedral would be completed. And if
why do you doubt it?
No, but where are we going to get the money? Where are we going to get the resources to be able to complete it? Even though we know a lot of our money is being put into it, but what is required to complete the National Cathedral, I don't think that this government is going to be able to mobilize that resource between now and the end of 2024.
You're talking about $547 million plus. I mean, if you look at the compensation packages and then you look at, well, some of what we've paid already to Sir David Ajay, and then the real cost of the project, you think it can't be done. Some members of government say governments, GOG, should fund the project fully. And you think they can't do it?
I doubt they can do it, even if it comes to the point where President Akufo-Addo decides that he's going to use state money to build that cathedral, which is a promise, his personal pledge to God. I don't think that as a country would still be able to manage to do that, unless we decide that we're stopping our road projects, our school projects, and all the other fundamental projects that we have as a country. And unless it is done, I don't think that any government post Akufo-Addo would want to waste, or put our resources into that in order to complete it when they are really, really priority of priority.
But you see, Suleimana, I've contemplated that as well. I have my own problems, serious problems with the National Cathedral project, and many people as well. Recently, we heard, the chairperson, the president of the Ghana Catholic Bishops' Conference, Archbishop Philip Name, come out and also state his concerns that, look, even the supposed Catholic representative there is not our representative. The person was handpicked, so it's not reflective of us and all of that. I mean, and that in the current state, what we're facing as a country, we have better priorities to look at, if you can even call the National Cathedral a priority, that is. But the other angle to all of this is, if we spend that much money on the cathedral, though I am against it and you are against it, if we do expend that kind of money on it, shouldn't governments that come at least complete it, so that it wouldn't be another uncompleted elephant, project, white elephant project? You didn't complete the thing. It's not yielding any money for. Do you get what I mean? It will be stuck in transition.
I got it, Ben. But you see, if any leader post Akufo-Addo takes over and really is committed to the development of the country, even if it requires $40 million or $50 million to complete it,
right,
there are fundamental issues in our country. Not too long ago, I mean, some people appealed to me to support them to get desks for their kids. And Ben, through friends, mobilized just about 25,000 Ghana cedis, just 25,000 Ghana cedis. And I was able to get desks that took care of about about 320 kids. So if just 25,000 could do that, Imagine what $1 million can do. Look, what has been committed so far to the National Cathedral in terms of money could actually solve the problem of having kids who are lying on their bellies to study across the country. Almost everyone will be catered for. So as a country, why would we leave that? Why do we think that always looking at these kids going through this struggle, we think is godly, and building a cathedral that will make God reward us? Absolutely not. So I don't think that any leader who is truly committed to the development of this country, to the well-being of the people of this country, would be doing what we are seeing now in terms of committing these resources when people cannot get basic things as water to drink in this country. People are still drinking from the same source as animals in this country. Kids are lying on their bellies to study. Kids are studying under trees. When it is going to rain, they have to close. When it is sunny, they sit under the sun to study. And then we say this is leadership, committing resources to this. So well, unless we have another leader who has their priorities messed up, I don't think that the National Cathedral is something that is going to be completed. By the way, you mentioned the issue of the removal of the closure of the borders and so on. I think that it was needlessly kept long.
Right.
Our neighbors, Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, Burkina Faso, they never had that in place, and yet we never heard about COVID ravaging these countries. So I don't know why we kept it for all that long with all the economic implications on people and on the country.
Right.
But we've now opened it. Our airport measures, it was one of the toughest in the region. Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, Togo didn't have that in place. But did we hear that people there were dying of COVID, or they were, massively impacted by COVID than we were?
Right.
I don't think so. So again, it was one of those. Initially, it was good to do that, but as we went along, I don't think that it was really necessary.
Let's dig into the Daily Guide newspaper. Two stories I'd like you to take a quick look at. NPP aspirants ballot for positions today pictured there: Stephen Asamoah Boateng Asabi, Joseph Ayukwe Otu, Michael Omari Wadia, who is first vice president of the party. And the balloting continues for slots. We also have on page 5, Russian missiles hit Kiev as G7 leaders meet in Germany. And how would I put it? Russia has been giving gas to some of these countries, and the countries are also in preparation, like Germany, which has been reacting, and other countries, in fact. What is your quick reaction to these? But one thing, for the first time in a long while, since the 1990s, for example, Russia has defaulted on its debt obligations, which has got some people questioning. And the squeeze on Russia, people say it will not be very immediate, but over time, it will set it back by many years in terms of technology, in terms of its economy, in terms of being a part of the Committee of Nations. Your quick reaction to these two stories?
Well, I think that the Russian invasion on Ukraine is an unfortunate thing. If you look at the devastation that is happening, if you look at the number of people who are being displaced, who are being killed, it's really a catastrophe. And I think it could have been avoided. I really don't know. Yes, of course, nations have to protect their integrity, defend their security, and all of that. And of course, globally, Russia is a superpower. You can't discount that. And so the moves by Ukraine to join NATO, despite all the potential impact on Russian defense, Russian security, and all of that, I'm sure there could have been ways of dealing with it without the invasion and all the human and economic impact that we are witnessing. I'm sure by now, perhaps Russia would be saying, well, we should have had a different approach rather than what we did. But It's difficult to pull back, because if you pull back, what does it mean? Does it mean you have lost the battle? Or what do you do? And so I think global leaders must continue the conversation to see how it can be resolved peacefully. But like you said, Russia would really, in the long term, suffer for this act. Of course, Ukraine would have to rebuild, and a massive rebuilding effort will have to take place. And we are all impacted. The food crisis, the fertilizer crisis, and all of that. And of course, whatever would have come to Africa as aid may eventually have to go to Ukraine for rebuilding purposes and all of that. So it's a global issue, and it's really unfortunate.
I'll wrap with these stories, and I'll fuse them together because they are stories that we find weaving through the three papers: Republic Press, The Finder, and Ghanaian Publisher. So take an example, Ablakwa Jubilee House in Tango over president's flight. You know, when the president recently was in Brussels in Belgium, then having to backtrack to Kigali in Rwanda, and the allegations that have been, brought to bear from Okudzeto Ablakwa. Tied to that, you would have these two stories. The Finder: NDC denied Ghana bigger presidential jet. That's according to Eugene Ahin, communications director. And again, Eugene to Ablakwa, enough of the propaganda. So that is one set of stories. Then there's also Ghana in hard times. Kwabena Dufo tells government to admit. That's Republic Press. And note this one, Suleimana. Will block all unregistered SIM cards after the 31st of July. That's according to MTN. Pictured there, Selom Adadevo, the CEO. And the final story I want you to reflect on. NRSA, that is the National Road Safety Authority, gives urban roads 60 days to fix non-functioning traffic lights. I'm sure you've spotted them time and again, depending on which routes you use. Traffic lights simply not functioning. In broad daylight, at the crucial hours. Your quick reactions on these. So the president's flights, Ablakwa on those, then urban roads and what they are saying, and then the blocking of SIM cards by MTN.
Well, I want to commend Honorable Okudzeto Ablakwa for actually taking up his parliamentary responsibility. Parliament as an entity is supposed to really be the entity that is supposed to hold the executive accountable.
Right.
And we've seen over time in previous parliaments how opposition members try to assert that fundamental responsibility. And I think so far, Honorable Okudzeto is one person who is really playing that role. And so far, it's not been denied that the president really hires or rents those luxurious jets. It's not a bad thing if we can afford, but as a country that is suffering, must we really be going that route? And for me, it is in that context that I applaud Honorable Okudzeto Ablakwa for bringing the issues to the limelight. You and I may not be aware how and when and how much we are spending on the president's travels, but for Honorable Okudzeto's revelations, and they all turn out to be true. And the details are always quite revealing. And so I want to commend him for playing that role as a parliamentarian in terms of holding the government accountable and playing that watchdog role. I don't think that is a propaganda. Propaganda would be, putting out messages and stuff that turned out to be false. But in this case, I don't think that we've seen any false claim or false message being put out there. The SIM card registration, yes, we have gone through the campaign period. I think it's still quite challenging for people, particularly those in the rural areas, to be able to register their SIM cards. I don't think that people should, bear unnecessary costs in order to be able to register their SIM cards. It's a good thing for our security and all of that, but the measures must be put in place so that people can easily register their SIM cards. The road safety measure, I think it's a positive thing. We need to fix those traffic lights, and hopefully they would be done. The issues are quite many. As a developing country, we don't expect things to be perfect, but that is why we expect that the little that we have would go into dealing with the the critical problems that we encounter as a nation, rather than the flamboyant things and the things that are meant to serve the interests of the elite.
Priorities, again, priorities.
Exactly.
Suleimana, do have the best of the day, and God be with you.
Have a great week.
Thank you. Thank you. Suleiman Abraima is Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa. He granted us audience this morning, allowing us into his home and sharing his thoughts with us. But up next, you'll be picking the thoughts of Muftau Nabila Abdullahi as he talks sports right here on the AM show. After that, we get into our big stories. Stay.